Production and distribution of City Club Forums on IdeaStream is made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Teodora Isanya. I'm a member of the Youth Forum Council and the organizer of this forum. I'm so glad to welcome you to today's Youth Forum panel discussion on the worldwide refugee crisis. According to Merriam-Webster, a refugee is a person who flees to a foreign country or power to escape danger or persecution. Since 1975, America has accepted over 3.2 million refugees, and with 69,933 asylum seekers making their home here in 2015, the State Department's proposed ceiling amount for 2016 is 85,000 people. Over the decades, the demographic makeup of the refugees has changed significantly. Up until the mid-1990s, most of the refugees being resettled in the United States were from the former Soviet Union and Southeast Asia. Afterwards, the majority of refugees were coming from Africa, and since 2013, a large portion of them have been coming from the Middle East and Southern Asia. From October 2015 up to March 2016, Ohio has accepted 1,344 refugees, with more to come. With the many conflict areas and hotspots around the world, especially in the Middle East, having spurned a new and unprecedented wave of refugees. In recent months, this has become an international issue that has involved global leaders, including the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and Pope Francis, among others. Here in the United States, it has set off a heated national debate that has involved President Obama, Republican frontrunner Donald Trump, and many of our nation's political leaders. The controversy surrounding this issue has caused it to spill over to our suburban and rural neighborhoods. Even with the constraints of our limited resources and recovering economy, our hearts are tugged when we see the plight of the refugees on our television screens. It begs the question, where does Cleveland fit in the whole picture? What have we done? What can we do? And should we be doing any more? We're hoping that with our three distinguished panelists, we will have a vigorous, enlightening, and spirited conversation that will shed light on Cleveland's role concerning this issue. With that, let me introduce our first panelist. Attorney Scott Bratton, a partner at Margaret, Wong & Associates, one of the premier immigration firms in the country headquartered in Cleveland. Mr. Bratton is an experienced litigator who practices regularly in courts throughout the United States. He was also the lead lawyer on the successful immigration case of President Obama's aunt, Zaytouni Onyango, which had become a national political football at the time. Mr. Bratton has been victorious in over 10 published federal court cases. His individual victories have had a significant impact on immigration law across America, as seen in many of his precedent-setting cases. Our second panelist is Tom Mrosko, Director of the Office of Migration and Refugee Services of the Cleveland Catholic Charities. This is Northeast Ohio's largest resettlement organization. They play an important role in aiding the immigration and assimilation into the American culture for the refugees. And our third panelist is Khoon Thomas Kate, Program Director and Board Member of the Cleveland-based Refugee Response Network. As a former refugee from Burma himself, Mr. Khoon Thomas Kate has a unique dual perspective from his personal experience as a refugee and his current work helping them. On a daily basis, he provides a number of invaluable services, including interpretation, employment coordination, transportation, and general advocacy to ensure that every refugee community member obtains critical access to resources and ultimately receives high-quality support. Our moderator today is the Youth Forum Council Secretary, Kristen Pomales, a senior at Brecksville Broadview Heights High School. Knowing that a refugee is in danger of loss of possessions, damage, and injury to body, and ultimately in danger of losing their lives, it's evident that such a person is in their most vulnerable state and desperately seeking a place of safety, comfort, and relief. In short, a refuge. At this point, I turn the forum over to our moderator.
Thank you very much, Teolu. Just wanted to thank our wonderful guests again, and let's get started. So I wanted to start off the forum with a kind of broad question. What is your personal definition of refugee?
And I'll start off. A refugee is someone that flees their country due to persecution, war, or some other type of danger. So, I mean, that's essentially how I would define it. The legal definition is a little bit different, but that's how I would define it.
So a refugee is a person who flees to a neighbor country, cross the border and flees to a neighbor country because of their political views, religious base, ethnicity, and the local government are torture or persecute them, so they have to flee for their life to another country.
I would say, the same thing. Basically, a refugee is somebody who is pushed out of their homeland due to a well-founded fear of persecution and steps foot across an international border and can't safely really return home or stay where they're at, and they're in limbo. So that's, I think all of our definitions are pretty similar.
Yeah. So does America have an obligation to help refugees and immigrants? What are the kind of different opinions that are out there on this idea?
I think that America definitely has an obligation to do that. I mean, we're a country of immigrants, and we should help those that are coming to the United States, especially those that are fleeing persecution or harm in their countries, people that are displaced because of wars or other types of harms. I think America has always been in that position where we've provided assistance to those individuals, and they certainly should continue to do so in the future.
For me, talking about obligation, I don't think it's an obligation, but I think it's a good heart. Like myself, I feel American government and people support us to bring the refugee into the country. We are very grateful, and we want to say thank you to every single person. And for example, last month we talked about the international journalists came to the farm, World City Farm, and talked to us and mentioned about the U.S. people are very nice. The U.S. government are very nice to open the door for us. Because one of the Americans went to Netherlands and mentioned about why don't you Netherlands open the door for refugee? In U.S. we have a lot of refugees around the world. So he learned something from American. So I see like American is very top and in the world, and also people feel like they are very nice. And this is what I want to say. This is not obligation. It is about the heart and their willingness to open the door for refugee.
Yeah, I would agree, especially coming from an organization as Catholic Charities. We do have an obligation to help those who are in need, despite where they come from or what their religion is or what their orientation is and their circumstances. It's a long history of help, that openness and that open heart, that willingness. There's 60 million people that have been displaced because of war, either as a refugee or they're asylum seekers. And the very few refugees that we help, get started in this country is very little. It's about 85,000 hopefully this year. And we do as humans, there's dignity in life, and there's a responsibility that we need to help those in need. Everybody needs a chance, and this is just one opportunity to do so.
Bouncing off of that, what do you think of Obama's current kind of push to allow 10,000 more immigrants, refugees from Syria into the United States? What are the roadblocks to this, and how will this be done?
Well, I don't think it's adequate. There's 4 million Syrians now displaced. Ideally, 100,000 Syrians coming to the U.S. would be preferred. That would just not even scratch the surface of the need that's out there. Speaking, from Catholic Charities and our resettlement point of view, 10,000 is okay, but nearly the need outweighs that. The roadblocks, there's a lot of roadblocks. Processing, having people interviewed in the country, making sure that they meet that definition of a refugee, doing the very thorough vetting process, the background checks, biometrics takes process and time. That's why last year in 2015, the U.S. only brought in about 1,400 to 1,600 Syrian refugees total. So very small numbers, or actually even made it here last year. And 10,000 is a start, but ideally it would be a lot more. And we would also like to see the other refugees, that number increase to numbers that were, available in the 1970s. So.
And I agree with that. I know that there's a lot of fear out there that if we let in Syrian refugees, we're going to be letting in terrorists and other people that we don't want to have in that country. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. Refugees actually undergo the most thorough background checks of any of the immigrant groups that come to the United States. One of my friends and former coworkers is someone that interviews refugees overseas, and the process that they have to go through in order to get to the United States is a long, time-consuming process that entails a lot of different background checks at various points, in addition to when, after they come to the United States, they can apply for a green card after a year, then they undergo even more background checks at that point. So the background checks are there as long as there's cooperation with other international agencies and within our agencies in the United States. They do thorough background checks. They should be allowed to come to the United States, and you see all this nonsense about not allowing them to resettle in certain states, and there's been lawsuits about that. That's absolutely ridiculous. These individuals admitted as refugees under federal law are entitled to live in any state that they want to and should be able to live in wherever they want to. And they have undergone this thorough background process, and 10,000 is not enough. I absolutely agree with that. There's so many displaced Syrians, and the horror stories I hear from my clients about what they go through. These individuals absolutely should be allowed to come to the United States and stay in the United States as refugees.
I would just add, Canada did a pretty amazing feat last December, and into the beginning of the year where they accepted 25,000, kind of like that. They made a commitment and they actually accomplished it. And our process is a little bit more difficult because of that background screening. It takes about 18 to 24 months to successfully go through the FBI checks, CIA, biometrics, fingerprinting, and all interviews. But 10,000, when you're talking about 4 million people, it's not a lot. It's not a lot at all. You have 73,000 fans that go to the football game on a Sunday. Just to put that in perspective, last year, only 70,000 refugees total came to the U.S. So these are not large numbers that's being put out in the news.
So it sticks with about the security and background check. Myself, before I applied for the United States, it takes for me years to wait for the result to move here. First, we go several interview, and the last one is very tough. DHS, Department of Homeland Security interview asked by myself, by themselves, and it's very tough. And most of the people, if you did a question that is not got along with the right law in the U.S., they were rejected, and people, couple of friends who live behind in Thailand border, they did not pass the DHS. So what I said, sometimes our public awareness, we fear too much, and also if we really touch to the refugee about ourselves, this kind of fear is gone. I have known some of the students here have worked with the refugee at our farm before, and they know about how the refugee feel, and also like us, we live in the society here, we try our best, we act like we are doing everyday work here as well too.
So you guys kind of hit the topic, like if we want to bring more refugees and the process is so complicated, do you guys promote a more simplistic process? Like how would we be able to kind of amend the process to be able to allow more in with still having the ability to completely give these people background checks and make sure that they are legitimate?
I would just say I don't think we need to amend the process. I mean, these processes in place to protect us, and it's important. I mean, that we do everything in our means to make sure that we don't allow somebody in that might have ill wishes towards our country. So I would never recommend that we change that process. The infrastructure would be having more people on the ground in those countries to interview. And that's difficult to do too, because a lot of these places are in war zones. They're difficult to get to. I think that going out and having these discussions here in Cleveland, and our policymakers have been open to resettling more in Cleveland. Like last year, it was just around 700. And we've increased the numbers a little bit, but getting communities wherever you live to say we want to welcome refugees, and then translating that up to our elected officials. But the security process, they're there in place to make sure that things are safe. And I wouldn't change that or heighten that or change that in any way. But I would trust that that process does do a very good job. Scott, I don't know.
I would agree with that. I think that the process is very complicated. I actually have a flow chart that shows all the steps that you have to go through in order to become as a refugee, and there's a lot of steps there, but those are in place to protect us and to make sure that people are coming are truly refugees, and that's why there are so many steps. I wouldn't eliminate those steps. I think maybe allocating some more resources, but also increasing the numbers. I think that if you increase the numbers, then we could bring more people to the United States, not only from Syria, but from other parts of the world where they're having all kinds of issues where people have to flee.
So going on a different topic, a lot of nations around the world are accepting immigrants and refugees. However, a lot are trying to push them away. How do you feel the effect of illegal immigration in America is affecting our opinions on actual refugees coming to America, especially with the presidential election and everything going on there?
I think with illegal immigration, a lot of people look at immigration and they look at the illegal immigration. A lot of people think of people coming in from Mexico, or they see or hear about the high-profile criminal cases or things of that nature, and they look at that and it impacts their views of immigrants overall. And I think that's a mistake, because that's a small, very, very small portion of what immigration truly is. Our immigration system is extremely complicated, to say the least, but there are a lot of people that are immigrating legally in the right way, and that shouldn't be impacted by the small percentage of those that maybe are involved in criminal activities or that come to the United States, and some of those that come to the United States illegally. But that being said, the overarching theme should be we have to figure out a way to fix the immigration system that we have set up. And the only way that's going to happen is if Congress, which I'm not sure this is going to happen, but it's a wish that Congress will get involved and somehow enact some sort of comprehensive immigration reform that will take into account the realities of the situation today.
I would just add to that, you guys are all you're all young professionals now, you're going to be graduating high school. The first thing you should do is take out of your vocabulary is illegal aliens. Let's not use that term. Let's use undocumented. They're undocumented. Maybe they came here legally and they overstayed their visa. And then the second thing is, I think that the distinction between refugees and immigrants is getting blended together, because nobody really knows what type of papers are in somebody's back pocket, and they just now are just making assumptions of one thing or the other. My wife is an immigrant; she's a naturalized citizen. But I think the U.S. is unique in a sense, in folks that we have talked to, that we do allow immigrants to come here, refugees, legally, and we offer them the ability to become naturalized citizens, which is a beautiful thing, which we can't do in other countries. But to really understand the differences between refugees, when I hear folks talk that refugees are pouring over the border, Syrian refugees are pouring over the border, it's not accurate. It's not true. It's just not true. It's not true. It's not true. The reality is, it's such a very controlled process, and what Scott said earlier. There's no other immigrant that comes here that goes through such a long vetting background check than refugees, and it's really, I think, a matter of perception and reality. So that's what I would add. But illegal aliens, they're undocumented. That would be a better term.
The term alien should never be used.
Yeah,
I know that the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals said the same thing, and the problem is when you go back to the Immigration and Nationality Act that Congress enacted, they use the term alien throughout that. So it's something that's repeated and used over and over. That's a term that should not be used to describe individuals who are undocumented in the United States.
Yeah, that is why ex-person or as a refugee resident here and the organization, we always request, whenever I go to the school or a public, I talk to people and I request, they ask question, what can I do for you? I say, the first thing you can do for us, the few things like share the information, like to clarify the distinction between refugee, immigrant, and illegal or like undocumented immigrant. And myself, the other side, working with the refugee community member, we try to encourage that. During the election period, they were very intimidated and they were afraid what's going to happen to me. I said, we are resettled here legally with documented, and we have to prove ourselves that we are not what people think we we are we are not terrorists, we are not bad people. We have to prove that. So talk to community. The other way to act normally, daily work, do their job, and prove them we are they are not people they think. And also the other thing, we request a community member here to share their information for friends, family, to your neighbors. So if public awareness, they know more about refugee and immigrant, that will help a lot.
So since we're in Cleveland, I have a question kind of regarding what Cleveland specifically has been doing to help immigrants, not necessarily immigrants, once again, refugees from other countries.
I think Cleveland is awesome, especially with their work around welcoming refugees. Like I said, last year, right around 700 refugees came to Cleveland through 3 resettlement offices. Catholic Charities is just one of the agencies responsible to initially helping refugees get started. It's Catholic Charities, International Services, and then us together. And the 3 resettlement agencies work collectively with 12 other agencies that include schools and municipalities to really figure out ways, how do we really make Cleveland the best place in the country to resettle refugees. So we have been doing public awareness. We've made short films. We've been people have been volunteering with the office, donating their time. High schools have been coming and having the students tutor refugees in school. Cleveland's also gone out there. The mayor is very much understands refugees and their plight, and has actually said, recently in a State of the City address, that he wants Cleveland to resettle more refugees responsibly, and make sure we do a really good job doing it under leadership of City Council, Matt Zone, Brian Cummings, formerly Joe Sipperman. They have been tremendous help of making sure that the community understands who refugees are, understands their story and their background, what pushed them from where they got pushed from, which country they're from, and then what can that community do to help them. And Lakewood has been tremendous, and Parma. So I think that we're ahead of the game when it comes to welcoming refugees, and we have a long history of welcoming immigrants, I would say too. You can go through Murray Hill, the Italians. I'm Slovak, so you go to Birdtown and Lakewood. So there's a long history of Cleveland always being there for refugees and immigrants and people from other places, and it's been good. And I think Thomas could probably tell you firsthand just how he was welcomed.
So right now we see the 12 agencies that support the refugee to resettle in Cleveland here, and they just work together, and we call ourselves Refugees Survey Collaborative. And this is very unique because the last 2 months, Assistant Secretary of Population, Refugee Migration, and Richards came here, and we asked questions about how we do it here. He said there's no other state do it the same thing like we do here. We are very unique, the Refugee Collaborative Survey. We work together, we welcome refugee, we support them every corner, even cleaning, schooling, government system. We do everything. So it's very different, and I feel it's very supportive for refugee myself too.
Yeah, I agree. Cleveland is awesome with respect to resettlement of refugees, and just what I've seen over the years, 15 years I've practiced immigration law. I know as attorneys, from our perspective, what we've done to help refugees is we've provided free legal services. I know that there's clinics that are set up for free legal services for individuals once they come to help them apply for permanent resident status. I know that I've been involved in that and helping individuals apply for permanent resident status and making sure that they follow through with that so that they can ultimately get their green cards. A couple weeks ago, I spoke at university hospitals to a group of doctors because they wanted to get more information about refugees and what they could do to help. And one of the things that my friend told me from being overseas and interviewing them, that the lack of medical care, adequate medical care, is just unbelievable in some of the things he saw. So I explained that to the doctors, and afterwards there were 2 or 3 that volunteered their time to go overseas at some point in the future in order to provide medical care to refugees in refugee camps, and also gave them some information as to how to better help refugees that come to them and give them an idea of their story, the cultural differences and communication issues they might have in order to help them better deal with the patients that come to them here in the United States. So after talking to them, they're more than willing to volunteer their time both here and overseas. And I think that's great as well, and just goes to show the willingness of people in Cleveland to help out.
So going broader than Cleveland, do you feel that America overall is still as welcoming to immigrants as we have been in the past?
Depends on where you're at. If I'm in California, I feel yes. If I'm some places in Ohio, I feel that immigrants are being targeted. I mean, immigrants are being stopped for no reason by police, and that happens frequently, happens in Northeast Ohio. I feel in some areas of the country it's more than others. Certain areas of the country or certain states are trying to pass very anti-immigrant laws. I know that we have an office in Atlanta, and they're not allowing people with certain work authorization cards to get driver's licenses, which is a change. So those individuals, even though they're authorized to be in the United States and be employed, cannot get a driver's license. So it just depends on what area of the country that you're in, but it's a politically charged issue at this point, and it's one that with the election coming up is not going to go away, and unfortunately certain areas of the country are not welcoming of immigrants at all, and others such as California and New York, they're extremely welcoming, and I think Ohio for the most part is as well.
Yeah, I would say it is a charge, and after Paris attacks on November 13th, really the backlash on refugees, I think, changed the narrative, and people were afraid a little bit because of that issue. But I feel that if we go out and do more of these talks to folks like you can take this message and explain to your neighbor, who refugees are, and they just want to fit in. They just want to be like you and I and have an opportunity. And that gives us more work to do to go out and speak more and talk about the truth and make sure that, you get your source of information from more than one place and really try to get fair information about the refugees and immigrants too. But I hope deep down that America is still a place where, the Statue of Liberty looks out, doesn't look in, and so it's still a place where we've been, unless you're a Native American, I don't think anybody on this panel is, at least to my knowledge, then we're all immigrants, we've all come here. And we kind of get farther down and we forget about that, but the reality is we all come from immigrants, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for somebody before us that took a big chance to start their life anew. So just remembering that and explaining that to others, and hopefully, America will continue to be a place that refugees feel safe, immigrants feel safe and welcomed. So.
For myself, I have experienced a couple of times. I was asked the question, why are you here when you took over my job? So I have to take time. It is an uncomfortable question, but I have to take time and explain to them exactly why I'm here, and measure about running from my life. I never dreamed to be United States, but fortunately, God planned for us that I have to be here, and I got here. I try to contribute to the community that I live, work together, but actually I do not come to get a job here. It's not my plan to come, but there's no chance. But when I got here, I try to make the community, serve the community as much what I have. So I take time and explain it, and later they feel more comfortable. But like the question is, say welcome me, but I say, yeah, comparison 1990, right now is a little not really welcoming for the immigrant or refugee in the state.
So it's almost time to move on to the audience questioning period, but I just have one closing question for you guys. In regards to immigration and refugees, where do you see the United States in the next 20 years?
I think it depends on who's president over those next 20 years and what types of immigration reform that we can get. My hope is that there will be some type of comprehensive immigration reform. We have a patchwork system that was created over a number of years. Much of the immigration laws were created back in the 80s and 90s and just don't make any sense today. I'm hopeful that we'll get some sort of reform and enable people to immigrate to the country illegally. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to increase the number of refugees. Certainly with President Obama, we're trying to go in that direction. There's others in Congress that are trying to go in the opposite direction. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get some of that in. A lot's going to depend on the president and in the coming years, and how Congress is constructed, and see if maybe we can get that comprehensive immigration reform that we need, not only to help with refugees, but to help with all of immigration.
I think as a country, we need to do something. I mean, the reality is immigrants bring economic opportunity here. They bring tax dollars. They help start businesses. They invent new ways to treat a sick mother. This is the reality, and so we need to really look at all of our immigration policies. Hopefully in the next month there'll be a slight change for a brief window of time that could impact a lot of people, but we need to really consider, for the benefit of our entire country, that immigrants and refugees alike bring, they bring aspirations, they bring opportunity, and they also drive our economy in ways that without it, by building walls around us, we're not going to grow. Google was started by an immigrant, so we need to really look at that, and I think have thoughtful conversations and leave out the emotion and really think about what's best. And I hope in 25 years that we will be in a better place, and we will have better immigration policies that are better for people living here and folks that would desire to come here. So I'm hopeful.
Yes, for me, that I believe the same things like we mentioned about if we have to look at about after the election, the government policy, the Congress do the new law for the immigration, and the same thing, a refugee, what we got here, we feel like we try to set up a business. For example, myself, when I come here, the organization Refugee Response, now we found together with the founder, and I'm also part of this organization, and when we work, we also serve the community, and also the same thing, we have an Uber job professional position, so we have to hire the Clevelander here or the people who live here, and we also provide a job to the community as well. This is what I believe, and I believe that American today is the top in the world because of the diversity and immigrate from around the world. All the people get together and make American hegemony in the world. This is what I believe too.
Great, so now we're entering the period before question and answer. Again, my name is Justin Tinker. I'm part of the Youth Forum Council here at the City Club, and this is the forum, more or less, possible solutions to the worldwide refugee crisis. And we're very thankful to again be joined by our three panelists. Again, we're thankful to Mr. Bratton for joining us. We're thankful to Mr. Cade for joining us, and we're thankful to Mr. Mrosko for joining us today and making this such a great forum and such an amazing discussion for the youth in our community. Again, the City Club of Cleveland has a long-standing reputation and tradition as a place where people from all different backgrounds can come together as one active community, members of our local area, to discuss policies and discuss issues that are very pertinent and important to us today. And we're very grateful that opportunity has again been extended to us through the Youth Forum Council with the general support of AT&T. So now again we're entering our question periods. We ask everyone to ask questions, everyone to get engaged. We ask questions to be short and to the point, so that we can be effective and moving along quickly. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Dan Gale from Ville Angel St. Joseph. I was just wondering about the quality of life for refugees once they reach the United States, because if we bring in additional 50,000 refugees, what happens to them? That they're essentially homeless and don't have a job. So I was wondering how that works once they get here.
Well, that's a good question, but the good news is when refugees come here, they are provided, they're not just brought here and dropped off at the airport and hopefully they'll find a house. It's really structured. That process, once they're approved into the U.S. resettlement program, provides them with initial resettlement benefits that'll help them find a house even before they get here. So my staff will call around Cleveland and say, I got a great deal for you. I got a family of 3 that doesn't speak English, no social security card yet because they're not here yet, and not a job. We rent to them, and usually the landlord's kind of like, you serious? But I'm like, yeah, we're very serious. So before they even get here, we negotiate and find an apartment for them. And the reality is, in Cleveland, most refugees within 5 months are getting a job, paying their bills on their own, paying their rent. We have not had any refugees in Cleveland visit, Lakeside, 7100 Lakeside, the homeless shelter, because they just don't happen. Because refugees come, they're placed in a home. We have a little bit of money to pay that initial first month's rent, and maybe something to carry them for 2 to 3 months, and then they're working, paying their bills. The kids are going, hopefully playing soccer, and they're going on their life. So the reality is refugees quickly become employed and take on those responsibilities on their own as quickly as possible. And actually Ohio and Cleveland is ahead of the nation when it comes to those numbers. The refugees in Cleveland tend to get jobs quicker and become economically self-sufficient much faster than refugees from other cities. So we have that going for us. That's a good question, thanks.
Hello, I'm Alyssa Pierce from Andrews Osborne Academy. I'm a junior. How do you suppose that we can change this common misconception that refugees and immigrants are terrorists or will bring crime to the country?
Well, you could talk about the crime and
Yeah.
immigrate,
Yeah, I mean, it's such a small percentage, but the problem is there's so much misinformation out there that people might watch Fox News and hear something, and I see it occasionally, and I hear something that's totally wrong, and it's not correct, and we need to get out there. I know that I am, and my firm is, we're getting out there to talk to groups to tell them that this is not the way that it is, that immigrants that come to the United States, most of them are not criminals or terrorists or anything like that. Most of them are productive members of society. They're starting business. They're incredible researchers. They're doing amazing things in the United States. And people just hear something like that on the news about, something like what happened in San Bernardino, and they think that everybody's like that, and everybody that comes here they're going to do something like that. And that's absolutely not the case. And as I said earlier, the percentage of immigrants that commit crimes is less than the percentage of Americans that commit crimes.
Yeah, it's much lower. And I would just say that, I just explained to you, the process that refugees have to go through before they come here. It's not like somebody's just, randomly picking people, go ahead to the U.S. Believe me, the U.S. puts every effort to make sure that person that they're interviewing multiple times and cross-referencing and doing the fingerprints and all of that, they really do a good job of then trying to ensure to the best of their ability that one of those refugees is not a terrorist, and they do a very good job of it. And what you hear on the news is that doesn't happen. The refugees are just pouring over, and I already said that doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. The reality is it goes through this really complicated process, and then ultimately, at the very last interview with that DHS person, if he just doesn't even like the necktie that refugee's wearing, he could deny his case from coming here, just based on that gut, reaction. So they go through that process. And how do we do it? We just, again, you got to point people to the right information, and to seek it out and to call my office. I get a lot of calls, and anytime we have an opportunity to explain to folks, that this isn't the case, this isn't the reality, we just do it. And hopefully that'll work.
In the background, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So in real estate action, we can do it as the community here, just like I said before. A student or a community member can volunteer at the Catholic Charity or International Service Center and work very close to DNJC, and you will see more and you will feel more about the refugee, how they are not really like what people think. They are terrorists, they are aggressive people. So we from our city organization, Refugee Response, we always recruit the university student and high school student, Hawkins student to tutor the refugee student, and they work later. They become friends, and even they become family. They go together, they talk together, they share food. So this is, I see, the best and real estate action. Then we can reduce the fears of people.
And the background checks are much different than they were during the September 11th time period. They're much more thorough now. The databases are linked up, and it is absolutely amazing the things that the government can find out about individuals when they're doing these background checks. So that's another misconception, is that the background checks aren't thorough. They're much more thorough than they were, and they have access to a lot of information, and they go through that information and vet individuals before they're allowed to come to the United States, or even to obtain immigration benefits after they get to the United States.
Hi, my name is Destiny Deskin. I'm a ninth grader at Shaw. And you mentioned earlier that the legal definition for refugee was different from your personal definition. So my question was, what is the legal definition of a refugee?
The legal definition of a refugee is someone that's been persecuted in the past or has a well-founded fear of persecution based on one of 5 protected grounds: race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. That's what the actually Congress drafted the refugee definition that's in the Immigration and Nationality Act, and that's what it says. So it's past persecution, or what they call well-founded fear of persecution in the future, even if you can't show you were harmed in the past. If you have a fear of being persecuted in the future, which has been defined by the Supreme Court as at least a 10% chance, then you would qualify as a refugee if it's on account of one of those 5 protected grounds: race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And those groups aren't necessarily easy to define or figure out. There's been much litigation on, for example, what membership in a particular social group is. I argued a case at the 7th Circuit in front of the entire court on that particular issue of what constitutes a social group. Lawyers can't figure it out, but that's what the legal definition says. Nobody's defined what, for example, a particular social group is, but that's one of the things that defines a social group. Or I'm sorry, defines the refugee definition.
Hi, I'm Rachel Smith, and I'm a senior at VASJ. Besides finding housing for refugees and their families, what other services can agencies like Catholic Charities provide for refugees?
Our office, and you're welcome to come. We're at 78th in Detroit, and you're welcome to come to the refugee farm. We have around 40 employees. We have folks that just work on job skills and helping them find jobs. We work with adult basic literacy, so we have English classes that go on 35 hours a week in our office. We have social workers. We have 5 social workers on staff, a psychologist on staff to kind of help talk and work with them through some of the traumatic experiences that they've faced in their lives. We have programs for refugees that come here with very high skills that want to get a job that's similar to what they might have done in Iraq, such as if they were a doctor or a dentist or a teacher. So we'll help do that re-credentialing. We have pretty much a wraparound of services really specifically designed to meet the needs of refugees, because we've found that the community in Cleveland is great, but they're not always the best at using mainstream services to find a job for a refugee because of their background and their experience. So we've adapted and changed things really to meet them at their level. The Refugee Response is another great example of a program that would support Catholic Charities.
Correct. We do the interpretation program because the refugee, they speak another language and they were placed in here, they get lost, they don't know they've never heard about in English, and sometimes I talk to the people here, imagine if I take you and place you to another country that you never speak the language, you will get lost as well. So the Catholic Charity provide interpretation program. Myself, I work with Catholic Charity a lot to interpret for refugee, driving them to cleaning, driving them to job interview, and helping them to as well.
Hi, this is a great panel. My name is Marina Vladova from Andrews Osborne Academy. I'm a teacher there. My name probably reveals that my people did not come on the Arabella or the Mayflower. So I support what you're saying. However, the panel seems to be presenting a message rather than engaging in discourse. So I'm asking you, if possible, could you present an effective, not a straw man, but an effective counter-argument against what you've been saying? Thank you.
We have a great lawyer here who litigates all the time, so we're going to let him do that. One of the best in the country is right here.
I know that we have to come up with a system where you have to have a balance between letting everyone in and not allowing anyone to come in. I know that some of the presidential candidates have talked about halting legal immigration until we can get the system fixed. I think that it's hard for me to argue the other position because I spend my entire life arguing for immigration. But there has to be boundaries. You can't let everyone in. The Immigration Act is there for a reason. It's the law that exists, and we have to work within those laws in order to enable people to come to the United States. Those are the laws that were written. I don't like a lot of them, but that's the way that it's written, and we have to, unfortunately, at times follow that law to allow people to come into the United States. But I mean, I think that, as far as our system goes, it's flawed, and it's flawed. Both sides feel it's flawed. The Republicans, the Democrats, whoever it is, feel that the system's flawed and needs to be fixed. We also need to obviously make sure that we're keeping out the right people and allowing the right people that are entitled to come in. But it is hard for me to give an anti-viewpoint, being, spending my entire life advocating for immigrants.
I'm not going to try. Yeah, I mean, it's such a passionate issue for me. I understand, I respect the question. Actually, it's a great, first time I've ever gotten that question. But I just think that, the system's flawed. I mean, it's broken. So we need to fix the system. How do we do that? We shouldn't make it, more difficult for, high-skilled immigrants to come here. We should try to retain the students that are a case and things like that. But it'd be really hard for me to argue on the other side at this point.
Me too.
Hi, my name is Maddie Conley. I'm also from Andrews Osborne. I'm a sophomore. I was wondering if I could ask a question specifically to Mr. Kate. Okay. As a refugee, have you ever personally experienced discrimination or seen it put upon other people?
Sorry, repeat your question again, please.
As a refugee, have you ever experienced discrimination, either personally or against other people?
In Cleveland here, I don't feel any discrimination, but measure discrimination in general, not only refugees. I see each other in the room here. Sometimes we look at each other. Oh, she is. For example, if someone drive very fast and pass you, you look at it. Oh, this is this guy. This kind of discrimination happens to everyone everywhere. But particularly as a refugee, I don't feel discrimination by myself here and the other refugee as well. Sometimes even they are not recognized as refugee, and we have a little issue. For example, one of the refugees work in the workforce, and he doesn't speak English, he doesn't speak any Spanish, and when he works, he doesn't talk to anyone, and people think that he discriminates other people because actually he doesn't speak language, he doesn't do communication with other friends, and the other friends later we have to explain these people are from refugee and they never speak English, so later we have to face this kind of misunderstanding between as well too.
Hi, I'm a ninth grader from Shaw High School. My name is Monet. I wanted to know, there are hundreds of political and economic issues in the United States. I want to know what inspired you three to speak out specifically about this one.
I mean, as an immigration practitioner, practicing and helping immigrants come to the United States and seeing the impact that they have when they're in the United States, that's inspired me to continue my path in immigration law. It's inspired me to help people that are trying to fit into the United States, and I see the impact that they have. I see the businesses that are opened. I see the research that they're doing and all the great things that immigrants are doing for this country, the economic impact that it has not only in Cleveland but throughout the United States. And that pushes me to go out and speak about immigration law.
I would just say, I was fortunate enough to work for a Catholic organization in Kenya for 3 years, and I worked in a refugee camp and with refugees there, and I saw the stories that, I saw firsthand the effects of what folks are facing, in that second country, and it wasn't great. And that really influenced me and my decision, with my faith, to seek that work out, here in the U.S. and continue that journey. I'm lucky because I love my job, and if you guys could ever get a job that you absolutely love, that's the place you need to be. So I'm doing exactly where I need to be, and a lot of it was influenced because of just what I saw, working in Kenya and with some of the refugees there. And then to have the opportunity to help those folks here in the U.S. to get restarted was just a blessing.
So for me, I just like a refugee myself. I always talk to my family all the time. I can find a job at a company, I can work by myself, I can live there, but I don't feel that way because I feel my responsibility. I speak several languages and I need to support the community here, like to contribute to the member and economic reasons to make the community get better. So that's why I love my job here, to support the refugee family. Not only the refugee that from my country, around the world. As a refugee fund, we work with a refugee for 6 countries at the moment, working at the farm.
Hi, my name is Lucas Hackenberg. I'm a senior at Ohio University. A lot of what you're saying, it sounds like you vet the refugees, bring them in, kind of help teach them English, get them jobs and housing. How do you kind of help prevent from erasing their national identity of their country of origin? So how do you kind of respect the cultural aspects they're bringing with them that they don't really want to give up in pursuit of like the American dream?
So first, I came from Burma, and right now, even people call me Burmese, but I'm not Burmese. I'm from Burma, but I'm one of the ethnicity just because of one of the ethnicity forced to leave Burma. And we got here, we call ourselves Karen, Karen, and we have our own culture, we have our own language. We want to keep this culture very unique, and what we do is we gather the community. Each year we celebrate, we call Karen New Year's. We celebrate it in Lakewood, and it's open to everyone. It's public event. We do not invite anyone, but most of the time we invite Tom, we invite the Lakewood mayor, we invite Cleveland mayor to come and do a speech about at the event. So this kind of thing we do to preserve our culture and also language. We try to teach our children. My 2 daughters doesn't speak Korean anymore, but at home, I try to keep them to speak Korean. Whenever they come home, they talk to me English. They ask me a question in English. I don't understand what you say. I pretend I don't understand what they say, and they have to ask me in Korean. So keep it communicating in Korean, and they stay present one language. And we try to make a Sunday school class, particularly for the community that we live together, to teach our alphabet and our language as well.
You know, the communities really honor it and love their culture, you know, and so it comes from the parents down. You know, I'm second generation here, but you know, I'm Slovak, so you know, Christmas Eve we make the table, and we have a space that's open for a tradition. You know, we have Lukvar and things like that. My wife is Kenyan, and she talks about her heritage, and the fact that she's Kikuyu, and so it just keeps going down. And again, I think the U.S. is kind of unique in the fact that we don't just put folks now just like, okay, you're Somali, so go stay here. We really try to bring them in the community so they can have both aspects of their, the American culture and value that, why they're here, what our history is, and then also continue to live, with their food and their music and their language, continuously. So it kind of happens organically.
So in addition to that, we also respect the other culture. For example, like for Burma, when we talk to adult, we talk to the teacher in classroom, we do this all the time. It can show respect, but in here, it's not really respect. So we have to, this kind of thing, we have to educate our community member. Be careful when you talk to people here, don't do this, But in our culture, it's respect. So we share both sides in the church or the school, like Lakewood High School. A couple of Burmese talk to the teacher and do this, and the teacher call the parent, what happened to your children? This kind of thing we have to clarify and solve the problem. So we also respect here, and the culture there, we want to keep it, but we don't want to keep the one that against the other one too.
Hi, my name is Chantel, and I'm a student at Shaw High School. And I was wondering, since several immigrants come from like Syria and the Middle East, and I was wondering if the country has done anything to like intervene with the issues in those countries that's causing people to flee here.
That's great. Yeah, that's a good question, actually. The U.S. puts a lot of money, the State Department, into preventing the conflict. Billions, like $48 billion, I believe the number was last year, so around $48 billion. To provide, safe zones in countries, to support the refugees that have fled from Iraq to Jordan or wherever. So there's no other country that puts more money into trying to help with the humanitarian assistance overseas, to try to, because when it comes, we don't really talk about this, but there's really three solutions with refugees. They're called durable solutions. The first one is that a refugee flees, and if you talk to refugees, most of them want to go back home. They want to regain their life. They want to go back to their farm, to their school. They just can't do it. So that's the first durable solution, that they can safely return. The second option potentially is that they can stay in that second country, integration in that second country. So if they fled from Syria and they're in Jordan, that Jordan will allow them to stay there and provide them safety and housing and all those things so that they can stay there, because more people in Jordan speak Arabic than they do in Cleveland. It's a little bit more related to their culture. And so that's the second durable solution. And the third durable solution is resettlement in a third country. So if they can't ever go back home, and they can't, these 60 million people, these 40 million people, however you want to count them, are in that second country, if they can't stay there, there's a third solution. It's a third country resettlement. So the United States is just one of 27 other countries that'll allow refugees in. But the U.S. does provide a lot of humanitarian support. Obviously our military has intervened in Syria. So there's a lot of that, trying to prevent refugees from fleeing and protect them as best as they can. But unfortunately, it doesn't always work. That's a good question.
If we give a round of applause for today's panel. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anthony Price. I'm vice chairman here at the City Club of the Youth Foreign Council and a senior at Shaw High School. Today we heard a panel discussion on how do we react to refugees in America, in Cleveland specifically, by Mr. Scott Bratton, partner of Margaret, Wong and Associates, Mr. Khoon Thomas Kate, program coordinator and board member of Refugee Response Network, and refugee from Thailand, and Mr. Tom Mrosko. Did I pronounce that right? Great. Director of Migration and Refugee Services Office at Catholic Charities and of Cleveland. On behalf of the entire Youth Council, I want to thank you guys for attending today's forum. Please plan to join us on May 19th for our last forum of the year on gun control. Will gun control work in America? Please make sure to fill out your surveys as you exit and join us again on May 19th. Make sure you talk to your teachers, administrators, advisors to come to our last forum of the year. Ladies and gentlemen, this forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club Forums on IdeaStream is made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.